Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. And today I'm actually going to talk about another important concept. It's called boundaries. And the reason I want to talk about this concept is because we talk about, boundaries a lot. And this episode is actually for everybody who wants to understand, boundaries. But specifically, I would say this episode is for especially for highly sensitive people who are compassionate, people who are empaths, because for them setting a boundary can be very difficult sometimes. And the reason uh, I'm creating this episode, it's because when I um, understood this concept of boundaries first, I thought that okay, now I know everything about boundaries. I thought that I had it all figured out. I know physical boundaries, energetic boundaries, emotional boundaries, mental boundaries, what have you. And but after practicing, boundaries for for a long time, I there were certain situations where I would find myself, I would find myself like I was still struggling to maintain those boundaries. It's like, I've learned so much about boundaries, but then I'm again back to square one. And that made me realize that boundary setting is not one time act. It's a long term process. And we talk about, setting boundaries, how to set boundaries and all, but we don't talk about maintaining those boundaries. Because if I decide to set a boundary, because I understand my limit, and I decide that, this is going to be my boundary, it's not necessary that the other person will respect that boundary, right? So if you set a boundary and there is a pushback, what will you do in those situations, right? So I actually uh, wanted to, talk about not just boundaries. Yes, I'll talk about boundaries in detail and how to set those boundaries. And also, different people, they understand things differently. Like, some people can, if I want to explain a concept to someone, and I bring some like psychologic some examples of like psychological examples, they understand it better. For others, spiritual examples work the best. So I'll try to give you all kinds of examples just to help you understand what boundaries actually are, and why it's important to understand the concept of boundaries. And I actually wanted to give you an example. For me specifically, when I understood the concept of boundaries, for me, boundaries are like, cricket game. If you have seen, players play cricket, there is a ball and there is a bat, right? So the ball is actually the boundary pusher, someone who is always pushing your boundaries, and the bat is your boundary, right? So if let's say the way it works is the person who loves to push your boundary is never going to stop, right? What are you going to do? It's like you just need to keep hitting the ball. You just need to sort of keep swinging the bat, and you need to keep standing tall and keep hitting back with confidence, because if you let your guard down, the ball will go past you, right? Your boundary will be crossed. So that's one analogy. That's one example that I love to give myself. It's just like the cricket game, a game of cricket, and Another thing, the reason I feel like, it's important to talk about boundaries is because when we talk about boundaries, people get really uncomfortable. Because if I, let's say I'm talking about boundaries today and I'm teaching you how to set boundaries, for many people it's like I'm telling them how to create walls in relationships, right? But if you think about it, it's not like that. No, boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are actually, um, they are the bridges, right? Because wall means that we're not able to talk to each other, and we just go, cold turkey, like we are not even in any communication. There is no, uh, so it's like we have burned the bridge, right? But and when does that happen in relationships? Usually, um, the walls are created when people feel exhausted in the relationship. They feel betrayed, right? They feel all those, negative emotions. But if we can set boundaries from the get go, so for example, if let's say you and I are in a relationship and we can set a boundary, I tell you my limits, these are, my boundaries, and you respect them. And you tell me your boundaries and I respect those. It's like there'll be a mutual understanding, right? Mutual respect. And because of that, we both benefit, right? Because if we don't respect each other's boundaries, so first of all, it's important that we both know our limitations, we both know our boundaries. And secondly, once we know those boundaries, we are able to communicate those with the other person, right? And once we have communicated our boundaries and we start respecting those boundaries, we so if I respect your boundaries, there will be no resentment, right? There'll be no exhaustion, because sometimes, people go overboard. They don't respect their limitations, they don't respect their boundaries. The other person is already not respecting it, and then they go overboard. Let me give you another example. Not just in romantic relationships, even at workplace, right? If let's say your manager assigns you a lot of work, so you have a lot of tasks for the weekend and you were planning to take rest on the weekend. If you're not communicating your boundary and you keep doing that, now weekends are meant for rest, right? I'm not saying that it's the same structure in every organization, but usually like Saturdays and Sundays are meant for rest. And if let's say it is already known in the organization, but there is a lot of uh, there is, like there is huge workload and the manager needs to push certain boundaries, and he or she decides to, push boundaries of certain employees, and the employee works overtime. Now the boundary got pushed, the employee will resent it. Specifically, if they are not getting any rewards also, the employee will be exhausted, right? There will be resentment. In a way, it is creating a negative atmosphere at work as well. Now if let's say the employee communicates the boundaries, and he or she makes the other person, the manager in this case, understand the situation, and they can come up with another, alternative, right? What happens there? It is like we are creating a bridge. There is no resentment, there is no exhaustion. We are trying to find another solution for the same, right? So, boundaries are not walls. Boundaries can actually help you create, like the bridge, and maintain, those bridges, maintain, those relationships. So, that was just one example. Uh, and I hope you understand now why boundaries are so important to talk about. Now let's come back to the main idea. Let's talk about boundaries. Mm, and when I talk about boundaries, actually, I also want to talk about two more things. I think these are all, intertwined. One is sense of agency, and another one is people pleasing. Now, for those of you who don't know what sense of agency is, sense of agency, I actually came to know about this concept this year only, and it's a life changing concept, sense of agency. Sense of agency means that you have the choice in every single situation. Okay, let me explain further. It's like another example I'll give you. There are many people who claim that, and they resent also. So, according to them, they had to stop pursuing their career, their studies, sorry, not their career. They had to stop pursuing their career, their studies, because they had to start working early to support their family, right? Now, if I have a person who says so and they are blaming their family, they are losing their sense of agency, right? Because even if, so they are saying that they did it for their family and they're blaming their family for it. In a way, the ultimate choice was theirs only. They could have chosen to walk away from the family and pursue the studies instead. They could have uh, decided not to, start working early, but they chose to do it because they felt obligated, or maybe they genuinely wanted to support their family, right? So it's your choice in any situation. It's always your choice, whether you believe it or not. Yes, you can say the person made me do it, he made me do it, she made me do it, because of her I did that, because of him I did that, or because of him or her I said so. But at the end of the day, it is always your choice. And the beauty, why I think this concept is so powerful and beautiful, it's like if you can just understand this concept, sense of agency, it can change your life, you know, in any situation. It also makes you, take responsibility for your life. So in that situation, you say that you left the job, you left your studies because you wanted to support your family, and you started pursuing your job, you started working. And if you can just come up with the right reasoning behind that, so right reasoning would be, like I said, I wanted to support my family, right? Blame game ends there. Okay, just understand, I had the choice to walk away, but I didn't. And then ask yourself, why did you do that? Okay, many I hear many people say that I got married because my family pressured me into it. Um, there are a lot of reasons, behind different things. Um, I charged less for my services because my friend said that the product is not worth it. Another example, what are we doing in these situations? We are blaming the other person, right? It's always like someone else, someone else's mistake, someone else is always wrong. But once you understand the concept of sense of agency, it's like I did it because I wanted to, you know do this. So for example, I charged less for my product, let's say, because yes, because my, maybe I was influenced by what my friend said, but I chose to do it because somewhere I believed he or she is right. Right? It was my choice ultimately. The reasoning was different, right? But it was my choice. Uh, the marriage example also. If the person actually understands, if the person actually, sits with the thought and asks the reasoning, yes, they did it, they got pressured into it, right? But there is always a reasoning. They just need to ask themselves. Now, I don't know what the reasoning would be usually in those situations, but those are, just a few examples, right? And the reason I'm actually bringing it up in this episode on boundaries, it's because when we set a boundary, It requires sense of agency. Okay, because when you're setting a boundary, you know your limitation, the other person doesn't. Okay, so I'll give you a very classic uh, recent example. Actually, I had a student, and for she had, booked a class, and for some reasons she had to travel and she could not attend the class. So she requested me to reschedule the class, and I couldn't do that. And according to the company policy, rescheduling is not allowed. Okay. So this student communicated, and she sent me, uh, so she sent an email and she requested rescheduling. And I explained that, rescheduling is not possible because of, the policy and all. And then she said that she really wanted to reschedule the class. Now, see, when I tell her that I'm not able to reschedule it, I am setting a boundary there. But because I understand my limitation, that I was available for that specific time and after that I'm not available. I understand my limitation. I have to take care of many other things. I have other personal commitments. I set the boundary. She pushes back. There is a pushback, right? She's again asking. Then I told her that I'm not available after, certain hours because I have other commitments. I have other chores that I have to, take care of. And then she again, there is another pushback. She was like, can you just give me 15 minutes? And this is, typical example of, boundary, how you set a boundary and it there is a pushback. The reason we set a boundary is because we understand our limitations. But the other person, the moment you set a boundary, uh, so when you're not setting a boundary, the other person is actually benefiting from it, right? And you need to understand this is very important. When you set a boundary, the other person can no longer benefit from you. So they will always try to convince you to not set a boundary. Okay. And in these situations, there are a lot of emotions that come up: guilt, people pleasing, seeking validation, and all of that. How to deal with it and still maintain your boundaries? That's what I'm going to talk to you about. Okay. Because whenever we talk about boundaries, I told you this subject can actually make a lot of people uncomfortable. It's like, the person is creating a wall. Let me tell you what a boundary actually is. Whenever someone tells you this is their boundary, or when now you will understand this concept of boundaries, and you'll be able to, look at your life, and you'll try to understand, maybe even during the episode only, you'll be able to, figure out like, okay, these are the areas where I need to set boundaries. Boundary is nothing but respecting your limitation. That's what boundary is. It is a personal limit that you set to protect your well-being. What is your limitation? If I'm saying this is my limitation, I'm limited to some extent. If you push me further, I'll break, right? So for my well-being, the boundary is necessary. That's what boundary is. Okay. And again, it is a personal limit you set to protect your well being. What kind of well being? Your time, your energy, your emotions, your values, could be your money, right? Could be any kind of, safety or well being. That's a boundary. Okay. It could be related to your personal space. Why do we have a fence around the house? Usually, if you see, there is like a picket fence. If you have seen, like, the classic villas or houses, why do we have that picket fence? Because of that, the same reason. There is a boundary, right? We are claiming the space. Okay. Similarly, if you don't want to engage in a conversation, uh, you know, if the conversation feels toxic, you have the right to set a boundary, because maybe talking about that subject or engaging in conversation with that person disrupts your mental peace or emotional well-being. Okay. And one important thing that you need to understand is, and like I told you last time also, maybe just write it somewhere and repeat it over and over. Boundaries are for you, not for others. Okay. Understand this. Boundaries are for you, not for others. And why I think it is important to understand that, it's because usually when we set boundaries, when we come to know about the concept of boundaries, we feel like, once we start setting boundaries, everything will be very easy to deal with. But try to understand, you setting boundaries doesn't mean others will approve of it. Okay, because again, I told you, boundaries are for you, not for others. So you are benefiting from boundaries, others are not. Why would they approve of it? Yes, there are many kind individuals out there who respect your boundaries, but sometimes it's really hard to, find those individuals. If they are not benefiting from it, why would they respect it? Okay. You set boundaries because they keep you safe, they keep you sane, they protect your well being, and they keep you aligned with your values. Long back, I created an episode on ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. And in that specific episode, I talked about values. Like, if you know your values, if let's say your values are to stay calm, your boundary will be around toxic people. If let's say your values are around, having a secure secure future financially, you will have boundaries around spending. So knowing your values can help you in, setting the right kind of boundaries. And when we talk about boundaries, most people imagine that simply I can say no, right? I can refuse a task, I can block someone, I can just take a stand, I can confront the other person, I can, show some aggression. But in real life, boundaries are not that simple. Showing aggression, taking a stand, blocking someone, it can go the other way also. The other person might not take it so well. Okay. Because when you set boundaries, the other person also feels, different kinds of emotions. It also awakens, fear in the other person. And people start, resisting those boundaries. And it's because, again, the other person was being served, they were benefiting from, something. And you set a boundary and they are no longer, they can no longer, take advantage of your kindness, or your time or your energy. And that's the first thing I want you to remember today. Again, same thing, you don't create boundaries for others, you create them for yourself. Okay. Boundary is it's a statement of self respect. It's not a request for permission. You are not requesting the other person, you are not asking them, right? You are telling them, this is my limitation. Okay. And I'm telling you because when I first began, practicing boundaries in my life, with clients, with students, with family members, with uh, many people, like, I used to feel guilty because I thought that I'll set a boundary and they will be like, okay, yeah, sure. It's not like that. They try to push back. There is always a pushback. They try to cajole you into, doing things, saying things, uh, and you try to, still maintain those boundaries. You try to, still set those boundaries, and then it can make the other person get, upset or withdraw from you, and that makes you feel, more guilty, right? You would feel that you have done something wrong. And I it took me like long it took me, yeah, I think I have been trying my best to practice boundaries for a long time, for maybe more than 2 3 years now. But I think I didn't yet understand that pushback doesn't mean you failed. It often means you're finally standing in your truth. Okay. And boundaries are not about changing how others treat you. They are about changing what you allow in your life. Okay, again, understand your values. It will help you, understand your boundaries also. Now, I think it is clear why we need boundaries, what are boundaries, and all that. Now, one thing I want to talk about is why people push boundaries, why there is a pushback. Why do people, push back when you set boundaries? Usually, because, again, I told you, they are not able to benefit, they are not benefiting anymore. And because your boundary, conflicts with their desire, with their expectation, and with their comfort. Okay. So for the student, she is comfortable because maybe she doesn't have other responsibilities, and that's why she's trying to, push the boundary. But I set the boundary for myself, not for her. So I have to respect my boundary. Okay. And I'll tell you, when there is a pushback, it's very natural, to feel pressure in those moments, specifically if you are someone who seeks validation, or who, you know is into people pleasing. Like if you're a people pleaser, you will feel guilty, you will feel pressured to maybe loosen those boundaries. But again, it also makes you feel like, oh, maybe, the my boundary was wrong. But you have to understand that your boundary is not wrong. It just means that someone else's interests are clashing with your limits. Okay. And you are not responsible for their reactions. I told you, we talked about it in inner child healing also. And this is how, things unfold. First we talked about CBT, the thoughts and all, healing the inner child. And now we're learning to set boundaries. Okay. And let's be honest, pushback is inevitable. Pushback will happen because when you set boundaries, it disrupts, the natural flow of things. It disrupts, the system that was comfortable for others. So there will be pushback. Be ready for that. Um, and if, someone was benefiting from your good nature, from your kindness, from your compliance, and suddenly you set a boundary, they will definitely resist it because they are not comfortable now. Okay. And once you start, this is another lesson, once you start setting boundaries, you will start losing people. Okay. And you will also start losing, parts of your old self, parts of your old identity. So even you will be uncomfortable because you are losing that old self who used to people please a lot. Right. So that is another part. But if you keep practicing, you will gain, inner peace. You will be, more authentic, and you will also understand people better. People who don't respect your boundaries, they are not really your people. Because if now they are not respecting your boundaries, that means they are the ones who were benefiting from you when you had no boundaries. Okay. This is actually, um, again, like 2 3 years ago I interviewed a guest. She said this, beautiful statement that people who actually benefit from, people who actually get mad at you when you set boundaries are the ones who were benefiting from you when you had no boundaries at all. And this is actually where sense of agency can help you, because sense of agency is your internal power to make choices and act according to your values. Sense of agency means you have the choice in every situation and you accept that. Okay, even if you give in certain situations, there is a reason behind that. Okay, and you always have a choice. Now, holding boundaries is also an exercise in agency, in sense of agency. When someone tries to push your boundaries, your power lies in your response. Okay, so sense of agency, you still have the choice. I set a boundary, there is a pushback, I still have the choice. Again, I can still, hit the ball, right? The ball will keep coming back at me, but I have the bat, my firm boundary, and I can keep hitting, right? That's sense of agency. I always have the choice. The moment you say that, no, the person was, cajoling me into doing it, the person was so good at convincing. It's not the other person, you got convinced because maybe you didn't have uh, any other option, or you didn't have the reason, but it is still your choice, right? Let's say you have an exam tomorrow and your friends are asking you to join, they are asking you to hang out, right? And first you set the boundary, you tell them that, exam is more important, I need to go, and I don't want to go and I want to study and all that. And then there is a pushback. So they will tell you, it's okay, you've studied the whole year, just come with us for 10 15 minutes. You can always, come back and resume your studies and all that. Now there is a pushback. Where is the sense of agency? You still have the choice. You can still tell them, no, I don't want to go. They will again try to convince you, right? It is like they are trying to push your buttons, right? And again, at the end of the day, it's your choice. If you go, you decided. You can't say they convinced me to go. You can say that, yes, they tried to convince me and I got convinced. I saw the truth in what they said. But who chose to go with them? You did, right? Reasoning could be different. You got convinced because you saw the truth in what they said, but at the end of the day, it was your choice. Okay, that's sense of agency, and uh, that's where the concept of that's why I wanted to talk about sense of agency when we talk about boundaries also, because when you set boundaries, it's never about the other person. So the other person is asking you to hang out with them. You set the boundaries. If let's say the other person uh, says something that you're not comfortable with, you always have the choice to set the boundary instead of playing the blame game. He said that, she said that. Where was my choice? I had the choice to set boundary. I could have walked away. I could have told the person. Yes, I'm not saying that walking away or telling the person about your boundaries is always going to work, right? Because there will always be a pushback, as we are talking about that only. But you have the choice. That's your sense of agency. And once you understand this concept, your life changes. You no longer blame the other person for something, because you know that in every situation you have the choice. Okay, and this is the link between sense of agency and boundaries also. Agency means that you always have the choice, even in situations when you feel manipulated, pressured, or trapped. You may not control what others do, you can't control that, but you can always control your response, how you respond. You can't control what someone says, you can't control what they do, but you always have the choice. I can't stop that student from asking for rescheduling over and over again, but I always have the choice to keep my boundary firm. Okay. And also, also wanted to, mention this. Uh, you when you start setting boundaries, you also need to stop expecting people. You should have no expectation that they will understand the reason behind your boundaries. Okay. You have to stop waiting for people to understand uh, your boundaries, and you also have to stop explaining your limits sometimes. Sometimes, yes, you can tell them that I don't, for example, again, I don't want to go to the party because I have an exam coming. Okay. But the more you try to make the other person agree with you, so for them, parting is the right thing to do. But for you, studying is the right thing to do. And the more you try to convince the other person to see, your point of view, to justify your boundaries, the more I think energy you waste. And it also, the energy that you could have saved for keeping those boundaries firm, now you're wasting that energy, right? And it makes you feel exhausted. That's why you just need to understand, why am I setting this boundary? Sense of agency. What are my values? Why am I setting this boundary? I still have the choice no matter what they say. That's it. You don't have to explain, you don't have to uh, justify, you know. And again, like I told you earlier, boundaries are not meant to make others happy. Boundaries are meant to keep you healthy, to protect your well being. And another concept that is similar to sense of agency, not similar, I would say, but usually, like, I thought that if I'm talking about sense of agency and boundaries, I should also talk about people pleasing, because usually people who are afraid of setting boundaries, or who can not set boundaries, or who can set boundaries, but then if there is a pushback, they can easily just let go of those boundaries. These people are mostly people pleasers. They love people pleasing others, they seek validation from others. And that's why, before talking about boundaries, I talked about inner child healing in my previous episode. Because once your inner child is healed, you stop seeking validation, you stop seeking external validation, you stop pleasing others, right? And once you start doing that, it's easier to set boundaries also. Okay, because if you set a boundary, maybe the other person will not like you. If you set boundaries, the other person will be upset, and then that will make you feel guilty, right? Because people pleasers often uh, hold themselves responsible for others' emotions, and you need to tell yourself that you are not responsible for anybody's emotions. Okay. Your boundaries should not be, like, don't treat your boundaries as negotiables for the sake of others' approval, right? People will not be happy always. There'll always be something, that they don't like about you, and they will always want to, change you. But that's not your job to, make others happy. It's not your responsibility, and you need to understand that. Now, let's also understand the psychology behind boundaries, because I think if we want to understand boundaries, we really need to understand the psychology behind it and the patterns in the childhood, right? I love, the this concept of inner child healing, because everything, like, if you can just understand that one concept, inner child healing, you can understand everything. So as we talked about in that specific episode, like maybe in the childhood, you sought approval, you sought validation, external validation, and we learned early on that love and approval were conditional. So I have to do something to earn love. I have to do something to be, to, uh, have my feelings validated. Okay. And every time we did something right, we were obedient, we got rewarded. We did something opposite, we, raised the concern, or we maybe, shared our views or something, we got rebuked, or uh, we were told that this is not the right thing to do. And so this behavior actually teaches us as children that being good means keeping others comfortable. If someone is comfortable with me, I'm the best. I'm a good person. And if someone is not comfortable with me, I have done something wrong. That's, the conditioning. And so we try to make other people feel comfortable, even at the cost of our own comfort, at the cost of our own authenticity, I would say, right? We sacrifice our authentic selves just to make the other person comfortable. Why do we do that? I don't know. I mean, I know because of, the psychology behind it. That's what we are talking about. And when we start setting boundaries, our nervous system goes into panic. And I will talk about, nervous system regulation as well. Uh, because when we say no and there is a pushback, someone did not like that, we declined the request and someone did not like that, the person rejects us. So it's like we are risking our belonging. Where do we belong? The person is rejecting me, right? I asked for something, I put myself first and I created this boundary, but the person is trying to push back. So if, let's say, I still maintain my boundary and the person does not like that, I'll be left alone. And I know when we talk about boundaries in professional settings, it's not like literally the person is going to leave us, right? Because in personal settings, in professional settings, we don't really care, right? People come and go in an organization. But the feeling, if you try to understand, like the inner conditioning behind that is belonging only. It's, that survival instinct, right? And so what we do, we will self abandon because we don't want to be abandoned by others. So we'll abandon ourselves because we want to, belong. We want external validation. We want to be accepted. And every time, you do that, every time you silence your truth, every time you sacrifice your authenticity, every time you agree to something you don't want, you, with every action, with every, those acts, you are teaching yourself that your needs don't matter. This is the message that your brain receives. Your needs don't matter, you know? And over time, this erodes your sense of agency. You don't have any choice, right? Because it's all dependent on others. And see how all these things are connected. And one more thing I actually wanted to talk about, like the polyvagal lens, the nervous system's role in this. But I think I'm just going to keep it for the next episode. Um, because I think this, if you can understand, the psychology behind boundaries, why do we need, why do we feel the need, to people please, and to maybe let go of those boundaries even when we know that it's not good for us. Once you can understand that, you can actually understand why it is so important to first maintain boundaries, first to set boundaries, and then to maintain them. First, know your values, set boundaries around that, and then maintain them. And maintaining them will not be easy. There'll be pushback. Even if, let's say, you know that certain food items are not good for you. Take an example of junk food. Let's say your values are to always be healthy. Your boundary will be that you will not eat junk food. There will always be a pushback, right? Because you're used to that. You're used to eating junk food, and suddenly you're deciding you will not have it. Even from your own self, there is a pushback, right? So, do you think like if you set a boundary in the outside world, there will not be a pushback? If you set a boundary with yourself, also, there is always a pushback, and it's like, muscle memory. You have to train yourself over and over. Okay. Now, let me talk about how to build boundaries with agency. This is the practical part now. I hope you understand the idea behind boundaries, why they are important, what they actually are. Boundaries are not negative. And now let's talk about the practical tips, practical steps to actually set boundaries with sense of agency without, sacrificing your authenticity. First of all, know your values. Again, awareness is the first step. Get honest with yourself. Why do you want to set these boundaries? Okay? And I'm telling you, I'll tell you like why it is important to, why I want to talk about sense of agency here. Because sometimes we have boundaries, right? But we decide to, those boundaries become, negotiables in certain situations. And why does that happen? Because of our values. So, for example, let's say you are someone who has set a boundary around money, that you will never lend money to a friend or a family member. Okay, that's your boundary. Fine. You know your values around money because you have, earned money, you have worked hard for it. So your values around money are that I will not lend money to anybody because I believe in hard work, or whatever affirmations you can come up with as many affirmations as you want. So you set this boundary around money. But maybe in the future, one of your family members, close family members, needs money. They genuinely need it because they are in some sort of, difficulty. They are in some kind of trouble. Now, in that situation, yes, you had that boundary, but your value, one of your values is that, so you have certain values around money, but then you also have certain values around relationships, that my relationships always come first, right? And if a person genuinely needs my help, I will always help them because I'm a human being, right? I respect humanity. Could be, those values. Now, why I think it is important to understand this, and why I told you that you have to be honest with yourself, because this is where the concept of sense of agency comes. I decide to help them, or I decide not to help them. It all boils down to sense of agency. I decided not to help them because I value my boundary around money. I'm not ready to sacrifice it. That's your reason. Okay. And if, let's say, you decide to help them, I decided to help them because, yes, even though I had a boundary, certain boundary around money, but I value my relationships. I always want to be there for my family. That will be your reason. So, in both situations, you had the choice and you had a specific reason for that. Okay. So, and this comes with awareness. You have to be very honest with yourself. And if you want to understand the concept of values, I will, link that episode in the description box below this episode. You can go and check and, just do this exercise to understand your values. So before you communicate any boundary, you have to first be honest with yourself. What is the feeling behind this specific boundary. Whether you decide to have it or not have it, what are the feelings behind it? Why do you decide to do that? And somebody else doesn't have to come and justify it. You can justify it and work on it. It's between you and you, or as I usually say, it's between you and God, right? It's not between you and the other person. Nobody needs to come and justify it. You decide. Okay. And and so for example, let's say you don't want to, someone asks you, let's say you are part of a project and it's a very important project and you really value this project, you really want to see it through. But when your team members ask you to work overtime for the project to meet the deadline, you decide not to work overtime, right? So yes, your values are that, I value my work, I want to give my best, I want to see this project through and all. But you can set the boundary, because you also decide that if I overwork, my health will suffer, my mental health will suffer, or my physical health will suffer, right? And that comes again with what? Internal awareness. Being honest with yourself. Why am I doing this? Right? What will be the consequences? You can always ask, about the consequences around your values, right? Usually, for highly sensitive people, because I used to work a lot earlier and I started having, uh, health issues, around anxiety and many other things. It's like, your body is trying to tell you that this is my limit. I can't go overboard. Your body is trying to tell you that something does not feel right, something does not feel safe. Okay? You have to listen to that message before you take any action. And again, boundaries and sense of agency. At the end of the day, it's your choice and your choice only. Okay? There are a few prompts, three questions actually that you can ask yourself if you want to decide where you need to set boundaries in your life. First question is, where in my life do I feel drained or used? Okay. What would I need to feel at peace in this particular situation? So, if let's say there is a situation that triggers something, ask yourself, what do I need to feel safe in this situation? Do I need to set a boundary? For example, if someone is asking you to work overtime and you feel triggered, ask yourself, where is this feeling coming from? What do I need to do to feel safe in this situation? Set boundary. Maybe I don't want to work. Reason, sense of agency. Why don't I want to work? Because my body needs rest. And I value that, right? Health is wealth. Okay. And once you have decided your boundaries using your sense of agency, your uh, choice to decide something, or your choice to, make a decision. Once you have decided this is going to be my boundary, now you can communicate your boundary if you need to communicate it, right? And third step, expect pushback. Now, when pushback happens, your nervous system is not regulated anymore. And I'll talk about nervous system regulation in the upcoming episodes. When you expect, so first set boundary, expect a pushback. Once you get that pushback, when someone is trying to, challenge your boundary, you will feel like, your nervous system is not regulated anymore. And that's the moment you need to first just pause, take a deep breath, and then remind yourself boundaries are for me, not for them. Boundaries are for me, not for them. If my boundary makes them uncomfortable, or if they are upset because I set this boundary, their reaction or their emotions do not define my integrity. I'm not responsible for their reactions or emotions. Okay. And you need to repeat it over and over. It's muscle memory. You have to do it over and over. And if you start feeling guilty after, setting a boundary, because it used to happen a lot when I learned to, set boundaries initially. If you start feeling like, I'm a bad person, I shouldn't have set that boundary and all of that, just know that it's very common, right? If you've been someone who has always gone, uh, you always do, more than you're expected to do. And you suddenly, you start setting boundaries. It's very common to feel, you know, bad about it. And because this is like your old self, resurfacing again. Your old conditioning, you're challenging that old conditioning. So, in a way, you are setting a boundary with that old conditioning also, with those old thought patterns, with those old actions also. Okay. And so, if let's say you feel the guilt or you start feeling bad about it, just understand that it's natural, and you are just teaching yourself, you are just unlearning certain things. Okay. You have to hold your boundary again and again and again until your body learns it's okay to set a boundary. Okay. And because I am a spiritual person and I like to, include, or I like to, blend spirituality. I like to look at things from spiritual lens also, because every boundary, see, spiritually talking, it's energy alignment. If you're doing something that you don't feel aligned with, it's never good for your soul. You're betraying your soul. And if you are spiritual, it's very important to actually, be authentic, listen to your soul, listen to, yourself. It's very important for emotional freedom, energetic freedom, because if you do things that you don't want to do, they keep you tied. Okay. And those ties actually don't serve you in the long run. Okay. And you don't have to betray yourself to, fit in a society, or, fit in a place where you don't feel aligned. You don't have to, betray yourself to be liked by people. Because if you can create first, a good relationship with yourself, and then you can, have relationships or create relationships that are mutual and authentic, where people actually respect your boundaries, that's the only way to actually feel free in the world, right? If you think about it, like in many relationships, people start feeling this suffocation, because they are not free to choose. They are not free to choose what they want to do in life, right? If you are free to choose in a relationship, that's where the real love exists, real respect exists. We are not trying to chain each other, right? And if if that doesn't make sense, just remember that boundaries are for you, they are not for them. Boundaries are for you, they are not for other people. Okay. And I don't know if I was able to, convey the right message or not. I'm not really sure. I tried my best, because I think for highly sensitive people and empaths specifically, boundaries are very important, very, very important, because you don't know, people uh, benefit from your energy, from what you have to give, because again, takers, have no limits. So givers need to set some. And ultimately, like, uh, if you did not understand anything, just understand this, that we all have limits. We can't be everything for everyone. We can't walk all the time. We are not machines. We need to have boundaries, right? They are a form of self respect. If you are doing just, if you are just doing, what someone else wants you to do, it's like you are a slave. I didn't want to use that word, but that's what it is, right? Boundaries equal self respect. You respect yourself enough to know your limits, right? You respect yourself enough to know your standards. You respect yourself enough to know your expectations from others and from yourself. I expect myself to rest when needed. I expect others to not be dependent on me for each and everything because they are capable enough. They are enough. They are capable of, handling certain matters. But if I'm always trying to be there for them and I'm not creating any boundaries, what am I teaching them? Right? So, in a way, it is also disservice to the world, to the other person, right? So, I hope, uh, and there are many benefits. Like again, you let go of people pleasing, you let go of external validation once you start setting boundaries. Now, I'm not saying that once you understand this concept, you just go out there and start creating boundaries where they are not even needed, and you just start saying no to your boss. I'm not gonna work today because this is my boundary. I'm not feeling like doing it. I'm not saying that. Be responsible adult, but at the same time, understand that you have limitations, right? And once you start respecting those limitations, you start respecting your body, you start respecting your energy, you start giving yourself the right kind of treatment that you deserve.